Hello. Okay, well, I'm here and I'm going to start this webinar shortly. I just want to make sure that it is working everywhere because I know that sometimes there is a little bit of a delay. Let me just double check. I'm not seeing it yet on the lead pages, so let me see. All right, I see myself. Great. Okay, so I want to welcome you all to this webinar. My name is Adda. We haven't met before. I am the CEO of Skill Crash, founder and CEO, which means basically that I'm a crazy person. No, I'm kidding. But starting a company is not for the faint of heart, although it is really, really fun and it's the best thing I've ever done. So I do recommend that you guys all give it a try. I just will not say that it is easy. Anyway, so before we begin, and today we're going to be talking about the 3 phases of a freelance web development or web designer career. And I'm going to talk a little bit about sort of how you get started as a freelance web designer or web developer, what are sort of some different milestones that you are going to want to meet, and then how you can sort of think about the ways in which you structure your client engagements, and most importantly, how you charge for your work, depending on where you are in your process of learning and becoming a developer or a designer. So we're going to talk about that. I'm also going to be sharing with you, we're going to be talking about rates and what's a reasonable rate for different roles. Obviously this varies, so we'll talk about that in more detail. And I'm also going to be sharing with you a budget that I used to use with my old clients. So just so that you have something to work with and kind of get a sense for how to price things, what's a reasonable price, how to talk to your clients about your pricing, all these sort of nitty-gritty things that, don't have to do with coding per se or designing web development, web sites, but are crucially important if you want to make a career out of your technical skills. So before we begin, I want to just do a couple of housekeeping notes. The first is that I want to remind everyone that our blueprints for the next round of blueprints starts on Monday, the 30th. And so these, our blueprints are awesome 3-month programs. We've got them for web designers and web developers. We've got some exciting blueprints that are going to be in the works and be launching in the next couple of months. So stay tuned for that. And the goal of these blueprints is really to take you from 0 to 100, right? So if you, even if you know nothing about websites except for that you like them and that you think that there is, opportunity in this digital universe, I want to welcome you to our blueprints. We don't expect any prior knowledge. And the goal of the blueprints is really to, give you all the information you need, teach you in a supportive environment, give you the community and accountability that you need to really learn, and really push your skills forward. And hopefully, then this is what we're going to be talking about today, is really getting you to the point where you can start to take those skills and use them to make money. So the other piece of housekeeping that I want to give you guys all a heads up to is that we actually relaunched our blog today, and we're super excited about this. We've been working on our blog for months now, reworking the whole editorial strategy. We've got some amazing writers writing for us, and then we went through a big redesign and launched a beautiful new blog. So if you guys haven't had a chance to look at that, I would love for you all to go to skillcrush.com/blog and take a look at the beautiful new blog. Super duper excited about that. And lastly, I just wanted to let you know a little bit about how this webinar is going to work. And the way it's going to work is that I'm going to talk for about 20 to 25 minutes. And then I'm here to answer all of your questions. So you've got 2 options when it comes to questions. One is that we have the Q&A app enabled for this Google Hangout, which means that you may have to click into the full screen view in order to see this. So you may have to, I think there should be a little flyout that's like right here. Hold on, let me make sure I'm doing this correctly. No, right here. It'll be right here, and it should say Q&A. And if you click on that, you'll get taken to a Google Plus page where you can actually ask a question. And then the other option is obviously if you're on the webinar landing page, you'll see right below here there is a Facebook chat box, and you can go ahead and ask questions there, and I will see them, and my goal is to answer as many of your questions. Ask away. I'm here to really answer anything that will be useful to you. So I look forward to all of your questions. It's usually my favorite part of these webinars, and hopefully it is yours also. So without further ado, I am just going to get started. And like I said, what I'm going to be talking about today is we're going to be talking about what I call the 3 phases of a freelance web career. Whether you are a web designer or web developer, I don't know that that necessarily makes a difference in terms of the structure. Granted, like in a lot of instances, it's really good if you, even if you are sort of focused on web design, if you can also code, that'll help you a lot in terms of getting jobs. Web developers who can also design, or designers who can also develop, are always considered unicorns, and they're always, incredibly valuable to teams because, there's just a million reasons that we could probably get into in a different webinar. But anyway, so the 3 phases that I'm going to be talking about is the first phase I call learning, and the second phase I call freelance, and the third phase I call consultant. So I'm going to talk a little bit more in detail about each one of these phases, but I want you to sort of start to think about how you're obviously, whenever you are making a career change or you're picking up a new skill and are hoping to make money with that skill, it's obviously, it's not sort of like bing, bang, boom, all of a sudden I have a super fancy job and my whole life is transformed. This is obviously something that happens over time, just like anything. It's sort of like brick by brick, you build a wall and then you build a castle. And, my own experience was very much that way. And the only thing I can say to you that's really positive is that what I found is that it really does snowball, and it snowballs really, really quickly. So I do think looking back on it, you'll look at it and go, wow, that happened really fast. But I just want to remind everybody that obviously things take time. It takes time to learn. It takes time to build up a network. And be patient and give yourself the time to sort of to learn and to appreciate the process and, enjoy every different step of the process. Because it's fun, and it should be fun, and working on the web is fun, and, the good news is that this is an industry that's growing really, really fast, and I think that given a little bit of time and patience, you're going to find that the return on your investment is going to be far, far exceeding your expectations. So first, let's dive into phase 1. So phase 1, which I call learning, is really the phase in which you are learning. So this is kind of the phase that happens or starts right after you kind of build your first website. You've maybe taken a class or 2, you've done some practice projects, maybe you've built yourself a website, and now you're really ready to you want to start road testing your skills, and you want to keep learning. So you really want to start to understand, what are the kinds of projects that clients are going to want to pay you for. Sort of, another way to say it is like, what is the market asking for in terms of your services? And what do you need to learn in order to do that? And then also, most importantly, what you really need to learn at this stage, in addition to, of course, just like improving your technical skills, is you really need to learn how to work with a client. How do you find a client? How do you pitch a client? How do you decide on your rate with a client? How do you determine scope of work? Meaning, how do you make an agreement with the client about what it is you're going to do for them and what it's going to look like, and how do we make sure that they're happy with what you do, and how do they make sure that they feel like they got what their money's worth with the work that you did, and you feel like you were not taken advantage of. How do you implement contracts? There's so much to do with working with clients that is outside of just the technical side of it. And I have to say, like, this was a really hard thing for me to learn, because I, for a very long time, was kind of under the impression, like, you just do really good work and your clients will be happy. And the irony is that doing really good work is a very, very good step in terms of making your clients happy, but there is a lot more than that to a client relationship, and you really have to learn about that. You have to figure that out, and you have to figure out how to talk to your clients, what to tell them, what not to tell them, all that good stuff. So, when you first get started in this phase, your primary goal is really to learn. So you really want to put yourself in situations where you are maybe 75% comfortable, 25% out of your league or out of your comfort zone, and really keep pushing your skills forward. And I really think it's important that, especially with your first project, really no project is too humble. Like, you really want to think about this like, every project that you work on is a learning experience, and maybe you won't be learning as much on the technical side, but you'll be learning on the client management side. And really, it's just about starting to ask for money. So honestly, like, I mean, I think that I think it'll be very easy for you all, or I believe in most instances, you should be able to ask at least for like $100, let's say, for maybe a simple one-page website. Say you I think a great thing to do at this juncture, and this is something that we encourage our students to do, is just send an email out to 10 of your friends and say, hey, like, I'm looking to learn how to code. I built some practice projects. Here they are. I really want to learn some more, and I'm looking to offer my services to people, and I need to learn about how to do that. I would love to offer you my services. I'd love to build you a simple one-page website. It can serve as kind of your resume site. I'll work with you to figure out what it'll look like and what information it'll have. And I'd like to charge you $50 or $75 or $100 or some sort of amount that is really not necessarily, it's not about compensating you for your time. It's about sort of you starting to get confidence that your skills are worth something, and that you are able to use your network to source clients and source opportunities, and then convert those opportunities into paid projects. And I also think that often, like, money holds you accountable, right? So, for me, like, I found that charging my first clients really made me do the work, and it made me learn the things. And my very first project was a WordPress project. I think I maybe charged, it was a friend of a friend. I think I probably charged her $500. I did the design, and I did the WordPress development. So I did all the, the CSS, and I integrated with the PHP files. And I think at that point I had maybe built myself one blog, so I really did not have any experience with WordPress. And my goal in the project was really to learn. I wanted to learn how to use WordPress and learn how to soup to nuts build a site that a client was going to want and that they could use as a blog and update on their own. And for me, honestly, at the time, $500 was a ton of money. I mean, it was great. Like, I was relatively young. I was unemployed, so any amount above the $300 I was getting in my weekly unemployment check was awesome. And yeah, and I thought I had won the lottery, which in effect I had. But anyway, the point just being that, like, the goal here is not to make a ton of money. It's really just to start getting your feet wet. The other thing to think about at this juncture is that when you're learning, I mean, first of all, there's going to be time that you have to take to learn, and then it tends to be that when you're learning and when you're new at something, you're pretty darn slow. I was actually thinking back about how I remember this is probably the 5th site I had built, but it was the first time I had ever timed myself, and it was a simple, I didn't do the design. I was just doing the CSS for this site, and I was integrating it with WordPress. And I remember timing myself, and I think, it took me somewhere north of 60 hours to code it all. And, at the time, I was like, oh, okay, 60 hours, I guess that's normal. And I think back on it now, and it probably would take me, like, maybe 20 hours, maybe 25 hours to do the same work, if not even less time. So just to give you a sense for, when you're new and you haven't done it before, it really can take you 3 to 4 to 5 times as long to get something accomplished. So I think it's really valuable at this juncture not to charge hourly. I think hourly is appropriate for phase 2, which we'll talk about in a second. But I think for phase 1, you really just want to do set rates, no surprises. You don't want to sort of get into a situation where you say, yes, I can do something, and then it turns out it's much more complicated than you think it is, and it takes you much more time. And all of a sudden, you had told someone that something was going to cost $200 and it cost $2,000 because your hourly rate added up to that much. Like, this is really not the time for you to maximize your earnings. It's really the time for you to maximize your learning. So, the only caution I would give you, and I think this really sort of starts to talk about when you're on the juncture between being in phase 1, learning, and into phase 2, is that there is always sort of a fine line you have to straddle, which is that if you charge too little, people don't always take you seriously, and sometimes they take advantage of you. So I don't necessarily have a good, easy solution to that, but I just want to caution you from, from charging too little, because often what happens is that that doesn't sort of, for your client, like, to a certain extent, they have to be paying enough that they are really interested in getting something out of it in order for them to be really engaged in the process. Okay, so once you have a couple of these projects, or maybe 4 or 5 of these projects done, and you're starting to, like, let's say you are starting to feel really good about your CSS skills, HTML, and maybe you've done a WordPress or a simple, the Sinatra app. If you've taken our web developer blueprint, then you'll know what I'm talking about. And if you haven't, you should. But basically, you've had some experience dabbling around in the back end. You're starting to get a sense for what the web development process looks like from start to finish. Then you can really move into phase 2. And phase 2 is what I'm calling the freelancer phase. And this is the phase where you ideally actually want to put yourself in a situation where you are working with someone. So this is really the time in which you are ready to work on a team, and you really want to learn advanced kind of what are called production level skills. And what that means is that you want to start to understand, you've gotten sort of the fundamentals down, like you know how to install a site, and you know how to do the CSS, and you know how to make it functional and look good. But now you really want to learn, like, when you are working in a company where the technology is an important part of what the company does every day, so even just, if it's like a nonprofit and they have a blog that's really important, or, they take donations online, or it's an arts, it's an art museum and they need to put exhibits up, or, it's a marketing company and they have a blog that they use, or, I don't know, a million different other examples that I can't even think of right now, a site where online tutors can log in and get some information. You really want to understand what it looks like to work on an existing web application, and what it looks like to integrate with a team. So this is a situation where you are not starting from scratch, but you are actually taking a web application that already exists, and you are helping to improve it. And you want to, ideally at this juncture, you would start to learn some new technologies. Maybe you get exposure to a new programming language. Especially if you're a front-end developer, that's often really common. Like, you maybe have, HTML and CSS and JavaScript, and but that would still make you completely qualified to work on a Ruby on Rails application as a front-end developer. Excuse me. I'm like, does everything look good? Okay. Or, you could get hired on a Python application, working on Django, or, anyways. The point being that, there's a lot of flexibility and there's a lot of opportunity in this kind of role. So, there's a lot of different ways to find this kind of role, but some good places to look are places like Craigslist, jobs listings websites, obviously referrals, word of mouth. In my experience, if you start sort of, you put your shingle out and say, hey, like, I'm looking for work, I've got some qualifications, at least, especially in places like New York, there are so many people looking for good developers and good designers. If you're a designer, you should put your work up on Chorafly, you should put your work up on Dribbble. And what you'll find also, and this is my experience, it's both my experience personally and also the experience I've seen of quite a few of my friends, is that, once you get one client, clients and referrals are just the best way for you to get new work. So you'll find, you'll build something for somebody and they'll be like, oh, I know somebody who also needs a website, and so they'll pass your name along and they'll go from there. Also, one of the things that for me worked really well was that I ended up working for a woman who was a marketing consultant. And so she consulted for a lot of companies, and they always needed websites. So, also those sorts of situations are good. Anyway, so what you want to do here is you do actually want to get paid hourly. So, how I define a freelancer is that this is, you are often in the position of integrating with a team. You're often working on a project that does not have a clear end date. So it's not sort of like we have no website and now we need a website, but it'll be like, we have a website and we need to fix X, Y, and Z, and there's ongoing issues, and, you maybe get hired for a month or two or something like that. In these situations, you often do not have a direct relationship with the client. And what I mean by that is maybe you're a subcontractor. So, for example, I have often done work where I will subcontract for someone. So, for example, like, you know, on multiple occasions, I've worked with design firms where they do the design and then they need a web developer, and so they will hire, I've been hired to serve as the web developer for their project. And that's a great thing to do. The problem with that is that when you don't have the direct relationship with the client, you don't have the opportunity to sort of set a scope of work with them. So you don't have the chance to say, okay, I'm going to do these 10 things, and it's going to cost X amount. But if you want more, like you want these 10 things and then another 20 things, then that's going to cost an additional amount of money. When you are a subcontractor, you're not actually interfacing with the client, so you don't have the opportunity to do that. So it's really important that you create a situation between you and whoever you're subcontracting with where you're paid hourly. So it's really on them to manage the relationship with the client and make sure that, you know, if they give you 10 hours of work initially and then it turns out to be 40 hours of work, that they pay you for that time and that is not a hit that you're taking. Yeah, so the important question that I'm guessing is on all of your minds is, okay, so great, I am ready to be a freelancer, I am looking for work, I'm super excited, how much do I charge? I'm going to charge hourly. So there's a couple things to keep in mind. So, I mean, the short answer is that it depends, right? And this is what's so frustrating about pricing. So in my experience, it's usually more than you think. And this has probably been my biggest problem, is that I've probably undersold myself. You know, there's different things you have to think about. A couple of things you have to think about. One is that depending on your work arrangement, you probably will not be working 40 hours a week on the project. So this varies a little bit, and it depends on the situation. So if it is a smaller project, you know, maybe it's definitely true that you will not be working 40 hours a week. However, it could be that you do a freelance engagement where you're in office with a client for 3 months or something like that. And in those instances, it's totally appropriate to, what I will often do is I will say, you know, my hourly rate is, let's say it's $75, but that is, you know, based on the assumption that I'm only going to work 20 hours a week or so, of actual client work, and because you're going to be giving me a lot more work than that, then I'm happy to negotiate a daily or weekly rate with you. So it's basically sort of a discounted hourly rate because, you know, what matters most to me is that I have steady income and that in total is a good amount of income. So, you know, a lot of people who talk about sort of how to decide what your freelance rate is say that you want to assume that you're going to spend about half your time actually doing work and the other half of the time either doing administrative work or work that's not billable. So, you know, whether that is putting together invoices or dealing with your billings or organizing things or getting new clients or sending proposals to existing clients or, you know, X, Y, and Z of things that you can't bill for. So anyways, in that frame of reference, if you're going to use that framework, then you have to think, okay, so I want to make, let's say that I want to make $60,000 a year, and I would like to take 3 weeks off of vacation, so between holidays and, you know, Christmas and whatever else, my birthday weekend or something, I'm going to take that time off. So I have to think, okay, and then I'm going to assume that I'm only going to be able to bill for half my time. And I have to say, when I ran my client services company, that was pretty accurate. Like, we found that we could probably bill about 24 hours a week. I think that was our goal for the partners. We found that junior people could bill a little bit more than that because they didn't have as much administrative work to do. So they could bill maybe closer to like 35 hours a week. But, you know, for anyone who also had to deal with, you know, sourcing clients and proposals and billing and administrative work, like 24 hours was really the max that they could hit. So in that situation, you really want to think, okay, so I want to make $60,000. So I'm doing this on my phone. You know, I'm going to work 49 weeks. So I'm going to divide that by 49. That is, so I want to make $1,200 a week. I'm going to divide that by 5. And then divide that by 4, right? Yeah. So basically, in order to make $60,000 a year, assuming that I'm only going to bill for half my time and then I'm going to work 49 weeks, I actually have to bill about $60 to $62 an hour in order to do that. So the other thing you have to think about is that when you are a freelancer, you pay a higher tax rate because you have to pay your own Social Security tax. So $60,000 as a freelancer is not as much as $60,000 is on a yearly salary. So you also have to take that into account. So $60,000 freelance works out to probably somewhere closer to like $52,000 or something like that. Yeah. So that said, again, though, I do want to stress that, like, in these arrangements that you make with people, if there are instances, $60 an hour might be appropriate in some situations, or I mean, I don't know about 60, but whatever it is. But if you get a client who wants to employ you and pay you for all your time, that can really help and can allow you to do it at a lower rate. So the only other thing I would say is that, there's kind of two ways to do this. Some developers like to charge a really high rate, and then what they do is they consider less of their work billable time. So that's one strategy you can do. So for example, I know somebody who charged $100 an hour, but she would always, she wouldn't charge for research. So if she had to sort of learn and figure out how to do some things, she wouldn't charge for that time. She would just charge for the time that she was actually spent coding. The other thing I want to caution you is that this is really an area where charging too little can hurt you. So, for example, the other day I had a friend who was looking for a developer, and he had found somebody, and this guy, looked great on paper, had great credentials, had a really nice portfolio site, all these things, but he lived between New York and Philadelphia, and he was saying that he was a front-end developer who also knew WordPress really, really well, and he was charging only $36 an hour. And, and my friend was like, score. And to me, that was a really big red flag, because that really is quite a bit under what would be the going rate of somebody who is, sort of an intermediate level, at least, in New York, or on the East Coast. And, and what that suggested to me was that this guy did not have a lot of experience, sort of hadn't been around the block a lot, and and like I've spoken about before, the problem is, when people are learning, like, they can just be so much slower than somebody who's really good at something. So, $36 an hour can sound really great, but if it's taking someone 3 or 4 times as long as it would take someone who is quite more senior, then actually you may not be spending less, which I realize is sort of the employer perspective, but because where I am now, I'm sort of thinking about things that way because I'm in a position of hiring people, but I just want to sort of put that into your frame of reference that, for employers, what they really care about is the final number, right? So most employers, like, they might have kind of like an hourly rate that they have in mind, but in general, that hourly rate is determined by the total, right? So they have sort of, they have $4,000 or $8,000 or whatever that they're ready to spend in a certain given period of time, and they expect X out of it. So it is really important that no matter what stage you're at, that you need to value your work, and you need to understand where you are, and you need to have some sort of sense, some sort of agreement with the employer of, this is what's going to get done in this period of time. Even if I'm billing you hourly, or even if I'm not billing you hourly, we have an understanding of what you're getting for this amount of money that you're spending. So now I'm going to talk about phase 3, and then I'm going to open the door to questions. So phase 3 is what I call the consulting phase, and this is really, after you've done quite a few freelance projects, and you've been around the block, and you've seen, you've learned about advanced things like, caching and scaling something, and kind of, are starting to really understand how the web works, how the industry works. You maybe have some domain expertise now. You've, for either because you chose to, or maybe you happened into a situation where you got a lot of experience, let's say, in doing marketing websites for, restaurants or something. Like for me personally, I ended up doing a ton of work for news organizations. So we got to the point where I really understood, how to do data visualizations for news organizations, what kind of stuff got a lot of traffic, what didn't get a lot of traffic. I really had some domain expertise and insights because I had really had a lot of experience and worked in a lot of different newsrooms. So we had the opportunity to do projects for a lot of different companies and a lot of different sizes of companies under a lot of different circumstances. So this is where you can really become a consultant. And you know, and often a consultant, like, what's the difference between a freelancer and a consultant? Well, you know, a lot of it is about how you structure the relationship. So, you know, consultants tend to maybe have a company, maybe they have an LLC that they bill as. They tend to have expertise in a certain area. So beyond, like I said, beyond just the technical skills, sometimes consultants are really good at a specific technical thing. Like, let's say you are a security consultant, so you know a lot about security around online bill payments, or they will have a lot of experience, maybe not on the technical side of it per se, but they will have really good technical skills and a lot of experience developing rich, interactive, you know, online news media experiences. And, you know, and I also want to say that, you know, it's, if, you know, the phase 2 and 3 can be somewhat fluid, right? Like, you could maybe be working as a freelancer but doing some consulting on the side. But in consulting projects, you're often in a position where you're really responsible for all the aspects of the project. So you may not have to do them all, but you are responsible for making sure that they get done. So it's kind of, it's a more senior level. You're less of an executor and more of somebody who is driving the project, who is sort of thinking about how the project should get done. That's a really big part of what consultants do. So, you know, if you want to think about, like, getting hired to work on a website and having somebody else really tell you, like, what needs to happen for the website, that was more of a freelance position versus a consultant, where someone hires you and says, I don't know, what should I do with this website? How should it look? You know, what features do we need? How do we do social media sharing? Like, how do I get sort of viral marketing going? Like, all of those things. Those are more senior questions, and that's more of the appropriate sort of consulting gig. Consulting gigs really are, tend to not be things that are listed on websites, right? It's very hard to get a consulting gig, you know, from a jobs listings website or Craigslist or anything like that. This is, you know, something that tends to get sourced through referrals and your network, so you know somebody who knows somebody who needs work. You know, I think, you know, one of the parts that you want to think about as you're sort of moving up the ladder of your freelance web career is, you know, in phase 2, one of your jobs as a freelancer is to really build up your network, right? And so, you know, it's supposed to build up your expertise and also to build up connections in the industry or sort of area in which you like to work, and make sure that you sort of have the ability to build a pipeline of projects coming your way. So tactics in terms of billing. So consultants do tend to work more on flat rates. And so this is, if we go back to, you know, this question, you have to sort of think about, okay, I have this goal. I would like to make $80,000, $120,000 a year. I would like to do that with, you know, I would like to have 10 clients, or, you know, a lot of this is like, you have to sort of figure this out about what works best for you. Like, do you like working with one client at a time? Do you like working with 2 clients at a time, 10 clients at a time? Like, what is sort of the style of work that works for you? Do you like to work with people over long periods of time? A lot of consultants will do something called a retainer. So I have a couple people on retainer right now, and for a Skill Crash, and what I do then basically is that, you know, they maybe have an hourly rate, or they have a certain project rate, but they basically offer me a discounted rate because I agreed to pay them every single month, no matter what, basically. I mean, and the idea is it's on me to come up with the work for them to do, but I guarantee them that income. So even if I go on vacation, they can still expect to get that income. So one of the other things that is always tricky with clients when you are doing stuff as a consultant is that clients tend to be very cagey about their budget size. So, like, we used to get this all the time. Like, we'd say, okay, like, you want this project, you want this website redesigned, but, like, what's your budget for it? And clients would be like, oh God, I don't want to tell you because, you know, if I tell you, like, what if, like, you would normally only charge me $30,000, but because I tell you I have $60,000 to spend, you take what you would normally do for $30,000 and you charge me $60,000 for it. And this is where it's just really important to be a really honest, ethical person. And, you know, what we used to always say to them is we said, you know, our rates don't change. Like, we have, and this is the budget sheet that I'm going to share with you, which I will put a link to in all of a sudden I'm like, wait a second, where am I going to put the link to this? I'll put it in the comments, both in the Facebook comments and then also in the Google Hangout comments. But basically, like, we used to, you know, I was explaining to them that, like, our business model was set and we had our costs, and what would happen is, like, you know, if they told us $30,000, then we would propose to them a $30,000 project, and if they told us they had $60,000, then we could just do double as much work and make them twice as beautiful website for $60,000. So it's just really important. That's just something I would wager that you're gonna have to deal with clients. You just want to sort of talk them through and explain that your goal when you ask them, you know, what's your budget, is not to extract from them the maximum amount of money, but it's to sort of understand, you know, what their needs are and how much money they have to spend in order to accomplish their goals, and sort of throttle the project proposal based on that. You know, otherwise, like, again, it's really hard to say how much to charge. That will really vary on industry, you know, what type of project you're working on, where you are in the world. You know, this is sort of where it gets into, like, economics of, like, what is the market, what will the market bear. You know, I think it's perfectly appropriate for you to start to think about kind of minimums. So, you know, I have to say that, like, one thing you learn as you get more experience is that it's sort of, there's an old adage among consultants, which is that the less somebody pays, the more annoying they are. So I remember that it got to a point where we sort of realized in our consulting company, which granted was not just me, it was a couple of us, but we kind of got to the point where we realized that if someone had less than $10,000 to spend, just the sort of process of putting together the proposal and meeting with them a whole bunch of times to negotiate the terms of the project and the back and forth of the contract and all of that, because we were a team of 5, it really didn't make sense to work on projects that were less than that, because the cost of acquiring that customer was so high that it wouldn't sort of, we wouldn't make enough money off of it. So these are the kinds of things you start to think about as a consultant. I'm going to work on getting this budget ready for you, but in the meantime, I really want you to start to ask me questions. So, sample project. So what you're going to see, okay, so, 1, 2, 3. Okay. Excuse me for 1 second while I publish this to the web. Okay, great. Here is the link, so you guys should all, I'm putting it in the Facebook comments right now. I would love for you all to try it and then tell me if it's not working. I'm also going to put this in here in the Google Hangout, putting it below the Google Hangout. Okay, cool. Now I just have to find where I am. I can see my questions. Okay. Oh, I'm so excited. Okay, great. There's so many questions. Let me also reload the lead pages so that I can see any questions that you guys have put on Facebook. Okay, fantastic. All right. Let me start by answering, I'm going to answer this question from Desiree White, and she says, how do you feel about using remote worker sites like Odesk to begin the learning phase? So Desiree, I think this is great. Yeah, I think that Odesk is fantastic. I mean, there's Odesk, there's Elance, there's a couple other sites like that. You know, the only thing is that working remotely with somebody you've never met before can be hard because they might have very specific expectations. I think maybe just the challenges are going to be the challenges of client management, and they can be a little bit more intense when it's somebody you don't know, that's not in your network, that you kind of can't meet with. So those are things to think about. But I think as long as you're really honest with them, I wouldn't be too honest with them. Right, so like I definitely have people who are like, I really don't know what I'm doing, right? So you have to instill confidence, but I think you can sort of talk to them about like, okay, you can sort of say like, I haven't done that specific thing before, but I will, research it and only charge you for the time I actually work on it or something like that. So yeah, I think that is a great way to do it. And honestly, I think those are areas maybe where people are pretty price sensitive, so they're looking for people who are not as experienced, who maybe don't, who don't have as much experience and don't charge as much. So I think it's a great idea, and I really encourage you to do it. And also, like, I've seen a lot of people get a lot of work from putting their work up on places like Behance or Coraflat, Dribble. I know that those are all web design ones. I'm trying to think about an equivalent for a web developer. But I've totally known of quite a few people who just got emails from people that said, hey, like, I'm looking for somebody, you want to come do some work for me, I love your work. Okay, I'm going to answer this question from Zena. So she asks, how would one prepare to provide expertise in SEO, viral marketing, social media marketing, etc., to web design development clients? So this is a really great question, and especially because I think you're right that a lot of clients that you work for, especially clients who maybe aren't as familiar with the industry. So like, for example, I work in the industry all day long, right? So if I'm hiring someone, I'm not going to expect that a front-end developer also knows about marketing and, social media necessarily. But I think it is really true, especially when you're working for maybe smaller companies, local businesses, other consultants, other solopreneurs. Like, they often need someone who can do a little bit of everything. So one thing I can say is that I think WordPress is an amazing platform because there are so many amazing plugins that make this stuff really easy. So, there's amazing plugins that'll help you with SEO on WordPress. Also, great plugins to increase social media engagement. Marketing is a little bit harder. Marketing, these are skills. These are hard skills. Like, they're not like coding in that it's not so specific maybe, but marketing is a really big skill and people are experts in it. And a lot of what I can encourage you to do is just like you're maybe reading about technology and reading about WordPress and reading about front-end development and all those things, you need to start reading about marketing and learning from the best in the industry. I am obsessed with a guy named Dan Kennedy. He is not a digital marketer, but he's really fantastic. There's a ton of information out there about digital marketing. Kissmetrics is a really, really good blog. A lot of the digital marketing companies have a really good blog. HubSpot is another one. I think that even just a little bit of research into that arena can be really, really good for you. And like I said, I really encourage you to be using WordPress with everybody, even if you're building really simple websites, because it just comes out of the box with so much of these features and functionality and just will make your life so much easier. So I hope that answers your question. Okay, let me take this question from Sarah Elizabeth. She can't find the link I posted. Let's find it. Can anyone else see it? Oh, I think it's at the top of the Facebook. Let me see. Yeah, it's like a Google Docs link. It's not linking on the Facebook comments, but it is on Google. I'm like, where can I put this somewhere? I don't know where else to put it. If anyone can maybe post in the question and answer app, that would be great. Okay, hopefully we'll figure that out. If not, we will definitely send the link out in an email to everybody who signed up for this webinar. So we promise we will get you that sample budget link. Oh, and what I did want to say about it is I wanted to talk about it a little bit. Now I have to find it. Where is it on my computer? Okay, so what you're going to basically see is that what we would do is that we would account for, I think that really the goal of this thing is we have a rate, which is flat rate. You'll see it's like $110 in the sample budget, but I do remember that we would vary it. So maybe design was a little bit less expensive and development was a little bit more expensive. And then what we tried to do is really account for everything. So we would account for meetings that we had with the client, account for internal meetings we had as a team, design production. So this was like design project management. Then we would account for design, and we had lots of ways in which I remember we had, we would allocate 8 hours to a home page and 4 hours to every other page. And so then we count up all the pages that we were going to have to create and multiply that for the hours. Then, again, we would include development and production. We would always build in time for development revisions. And that was largely because we really wanted to sort of call it out to the clients and just acknowledge, like, look, like, we're going to do a bunch of development, and then we're going to send it to you, and then you're going to have a bunch of changes that you want to do, and we want to build that into the total from the get-go so that we set your expectations. And then from that, we would do the total. I should also say, for us, we built our margin into our rate. So when you're running a consulting firm, you usually want to try to build about a 30% margin into all of your projects. But you could also just build it into the total. Okay, so let me go back and answer some more questions. So Kim Sanders is asking here, would you suggest starting to freelance under an individual name or under a business name? This is a really, really good question. I don't know that I have an answer for that. I mean, I have personally always, I guess I've really always done both is the answer. So when I was working as an individual, I actually didn't even LLC myself, which is not, I would recommend that everyone LLC themselves, and we can have a separate webinar all about, recommendations on, and I'm not a lawyer, I should say, but just sort of, recommendations about how business structures and how you structure things. I did not personally LLC myself. You should personally LLC yourself, whether or not you are working, whatever name you're working under, you should have an LLC. Otherwise, I guess it's really a question of, you have to think about what is your long-term plan with this. So when I chose to create my LLC at the time I had a business partner, and so I guess that sort of solved that question for me, because it wasn't really appropriate to call it Auto LLC, because it wasn't just me, it was me and her, and we knew, I think, that we wanted to build a business where we hired people and we're a design company, so it made sense to us to give it a name. I guess I would say I think that in a lot of businesses, and especially if you're going to be like a consultant, your brand is going to be really important. So you as a person are going to be, people buy from people, and that was at play even with my web design company. So we had a name, it was called Balance, but obviously still, like, all of the incoming work came from personal connections we had with people, or personal connections we developed with inbound leads. So I do think it's really important to acknowledge that, like, your personality, who you are, your reputation in the industry, all those things are going to be really important to your business no matter what you call it. Yeah, I think you just have to sort of have a gut check with yourself. What feels right to you, and remember that especially, like, you can always change it. So I also think it's really important. I know a lot of people who get really hung up on naming, and I think that's unnecessary, and really you should give yourself like a day or two to pick a name, and then just, if all else fails, go with Kim Sanders Designs and just rock on with your bad self. Okay. All right. So Desiree White is asking a really good question. Do you have any resources for finding regional averages on pricing? So I do, actually. So the I don't have one. Well, it's a good question. I'm trying to think off the top of my head. There's a really good one for web designers, and it is it's the ADA, the American Designer Association. I'm looking it up right now to see if I can figure out. Okay, it's AIGA, and they provide salary information. I think it's under tools and resources. Yep, compensation. Now that I'm looking at it, I'm like, okay, it looks like it might actually be for. Yeah. Okay. So I'm gonna put this link it's called designsalaries.aiga.org. And I'm going to put this link both in the Facebook comments and here in the Google Hangout. I'm going to add another comment. What you'll see with this is that this is yearly salaries, but I think you can use that to back into an hourly rate, and just knowing, you know, based on the formula that we talked about, right? So you want to have an hourly rate that does not assume that you're going to work 40 hours a week. Granted, I realize this is for designers, and you very well may be wanting to be a developer. You know, the one we use Indeed to sort of source our information. So I recommend that you guys take a look at that. They have some sort of information about compensation. The other thing is that I do not think that you should be shy about asking. So if you know somebody who's working in your area, go ahead and ask them, you know, what are the going rates for people who are working in development? To a certain extent, going rates, you know, can help guide you, and they also sometimes aren't the best guidepost because it's all so based on you, where you are in your career at this point, what experience you have, and especially the client, right? So, I mean, just it's kind of funny because you know, for us, we're okay, teachers make less than bankers, but then the funny thing is it's well, that applies to developers, even if they're, you know, if you're working at a school versus working at a bank, you're obviously, or maybe not obviously, but I'm going to tell you now that, you know, there's a lot of salary variation. Like I said, I think that, you know, even for someone who's really, really junior, anything less than $15 an hour I would say is ridiculous. And I would say that sort of the floor should be in the $20 to $25 range. I have not personally ever paid anyone more than $150. Although I've heard stories about people being quoted prices in the $175 to $25 range. I believe that there are people who get away with that or who are doing work where that's totally worth it. That's not sort of the industry that I'm in. So the range that I tend to see, it tends to be from about $50 an hour to $125 an hour or so. And, you know, if you're a back-end developer with a lot of experience who's quite senior, you're obviously going to end up on the higher end of that. You know, and the more junior people are going to end up in the sort of $50 range. If you're really junior, maybe you're under $50. Again, though, my personal preference as an employer with someone who's that junior would be to pay them a flat rate. So I hope that is helpful. Oh. I'm getting a chat. Oh, not from. I think I'm going to have to. Okay. All right. Sherry. So Sherry asks, what if you build the site for a client and she wants you to continue updating? How would you price it on a continuous basis? It's a great question, Sherry, and it is very, very likely to have happen. So I think it's really important to think about this beforehand. And the way I would do it is I would say, I have to close this so that I don't get, so I don't hear those chats. What I would say is that a good way to do this, I mean, literally you can just say hourly. So we often would build budgets where we would say, okay, the cost of this is going to be $10,000. After we launch, we will do maintenance work for $65 an hour, let's say. Another way to do it is that you can actually say, you can give them another flat rate, right? So you can say, I will do, you know, up to 20 hours of work for $1,500 or $1,000 to maintain the site on a continuous basis. Maybe that's a really good opportunity to negotiate a retainer with them. So you can both agree that websites are living objects and they need constant maintenance. This is something that you're going to find yourself educating your clients about a lot, because clients tend to think, oh, I paid for it and I build it and then it's done. But that is just could not be further from the truth. And I have, you know, a million deployments to share with you to prove that. So, yeah, so that's how I would do it. I would just have a conversation with the client and just, you know, set expectations. You can build them on a flat rate, but with an expectation of how many hours that you're going to do. So Jessica's asking if I can make it public. Yes, I thought I did make it public. I'm so sorry. We will have to figure that out. Hold on one second. So actually, Kelly, I see that you're in this. Can you see if there's a way? I may have to, I may need to share this with my other. Sometimes when you are working on like non-regular Gmail sites, it's weird. All right, we're gonna figure this out and get back to you. My apologies. Okay, so I have a question from the monkey that says, how do you approach building a project where your level is mixed? Say phase 3 for one aspect of phase 1 for another. That's a really, really good point. I think that maybe that is a good opportunity for you to be billing on a flat rate rather than hourly. So, you know, you sort of, yeah, sorry, I'm looking at this and it says that they're all, sorry, my apologies. I just got totally distracted by the fact that, that the thing is not public. But yeah, so I think that's a good opportunity for you to be doing it on a flat rate. So I think what you want to do is you want to, the part that you are at phase 3 for, you probably have a really good sense for what the scope of work is, how hard it's going to be, what it should cost for you to do that work. So I would build your budget based on your knowledge of that, and then sort of add, so you know, say, okay, maybe the budget total is going to be $3,000 because you charge $65 an hour, and you know it's going to take you 15 hours to do this, and then you are going to bill another 5 hours for this work that you are not as experienced with, knowing that it may take you 15 hours, but that's okay because you understand that you're basically getting paid to learn, and that's really, really awesome. So yes, I hope that helps. Okay, I'm going to take this question from Gina. And Gina asks, what is your opinion on software equipment upgrades? For example, how do you know when to start investing on a new computer, Adobe packages, paid wireframing programs, etc.? It's a really, really good question. And it's funny because I bought a computer 4 years ago, and I mean, I paid less than $2,000 for it. And I built 2 companies on that little computer. And I mean, it's like the return on investment could not be better. And yet I'm thinking about replacing it. I'm like, oh God, another $2,000. It's so expensive. I mean, one thing to keep in mind is that that is cost that you can deduct from your salary, meaning that it'll decrease your, like obviously you have to spend the money, which sucks, but it will be money you can take out of your salary for taxes. So that's really, really good, especially if you have an LLC. This is definitely the case. So think about that. The other thing is you just have to think like, I mean, I'm all for saving money and being, there, you know, it's kind of like you have to really think about like what are tools that you need in order to do your job and what are nice to have. So, for example, you need a good computer. Period in a story. And the problem is if you don't have a good computer, you will lose so much time dealing with your crappy computer and it not working and it going slow, that'll really decrease your ability to get work done in a way that will hurt your bottom line. So, you know, and then paid wireframing programs, I mean, I will tell you that, you know, I remember actually when my partner and I, this was very early, we kind of like, we needed a wireframing program and we had worked with Acture before and we wanted to get it and it cost $500 and we were like, oh dear, that is so much money for a wireframing program. Will it be useful? And we found that it like paid for itself in the first project because it allowed us to do clickable wireframes, which saved us so much time on the development side. It also really impressed clients, which is important. Like you know, there is a little bit of sort of like theater to this kind of thing. You do have to, you know, give clients a good experience of working with you. Like they want to be impressed with the work you do. So, you know, investments that you make like that. The other thing I really want to encourage all of you is that if you're going to work from home, you really need to get a good internet connection. There's nothing worse than hiring someone to work remotely and then having hopping on Google Hangout with them and them falling off every 5 minutes. So yeah, but then, you know, then I would say, but do you need a fancy, you know, desk and your own room, or do you have to go pay for an office space? Like those are things where I think, you know, that's a judgment call you have to make. Maybe you're 100 times more productive in your office space, and then power to you. You should absolutely go pay for that. But I think in terms of, you know, tools, honestly, I guess the takeaway is that you need to probably invest in those things before you're comfortable. But I really do believe that if you're going to work in this industry and going to work for a while, that investment will be, it'll quickly become like nothing. I have to look at the Facebook comments. Let me see if I can get this sample budget to be public to everybody. Here, hold on 1 second. I'm going to make a copy. Here we go. Okay, I'm putting a new link into the Facebook comments and also on the Google Hangout. And this one is public, I promise. Okay, let me look at the questions on Facebook and make sure I'm not missing anything. Okay, so Lee asks, what is the best way to start networking to larger companies as a single consultant? So this is a really good question, and you know, it's really hard, unfortunately, to answer it because it really depends on, you know, on the industry and what you're doing. However, I will say that you have to remember, even at big companies, like big companies are just made up of people, and it's going to be a single individual who's going to bring you into a big company, just like a single individual is going to bring you into a small company. So you know, my only experience with this is working with big media companies, and the way that we networked with them was that, you know, it was a combination of referrals from clients that we had before, but it was also going to industry events. So, you know, so I think sort of the same things that apply to networking in most other cases are going to apply here. So it's going to be about identifying who your target market is, so identifying what are the big companies that you would like to work with, and then figuring out, you know, if there's conferences or events or open houses or anything like that where you could possibly meet people who are there. That's really going to be the best avenue for you to start to work with them. Okay. So Jamie is wondering, can you explain more about the visual data work you did for news companies? How did you find clients? What programs did you use, etc.? So it all started because me and two of my friends wanted to work on a project together, and we, at the time, Bloomberg, who's no longer mayor of New York, had created this contest. So contest, basically, is what I'm going to tell you. And there's actually a website that I can find that has lists of contests that are available. But basically, there's both a lot of hackathons that take place in the web industry, and then there's also a lot of contests. And what will happen is, like, you'll have, like, you know, some government site or some big company will sponsor a contest, and they'll ask for submissions. And so what we did, what this contest was, it was called New York Big Apps Competition, and they basically put out a bunch of data sets and invited technologists living in New York to take these data sets and make websites or apps, like mobile phone apps, with them. And their only caveat was they had to be free and they had to be available to everybody. And at the time, you know, we were just getting started in working in web, and just I was, you know, looking to learn a lot. And I basically harangued two of my friends, one of whom was a Ruby on Rails developer, one of whom was a designer, and I was going to be the front end developer, to work on it with me. And we just kind of brainstormed. We looked at the data sets and brainstormed some ideas, and we came up with this idea, which is that we were going to make profiles for every single school in New York City, which is 1,600 public schools, and we were going to, you know, use all the available data that we had about how much money they spend, what their racial makeup was, and their achievement, and the percentage of special ed, and you know, teacher-student ratio, and all those kinds of things, and just make it so you could search for a school in your neighborhood and find a list and learn about them. And then we submitted to this competition, and we won 3rd place. And it was, what was really good about it was, I mean, there's a lot of things that came out of that was great. We didn't win a lot of money. I think we won $1,000. So we split it 3 ways, and we each made like $333. But so it really wasn't for the money. But we just met people, and so it was a great networking opportunity. And I think honestly, like, the biggest opportunity for us. So through that, I made friends with a woman who was working at a news organization covering education, and that sort of snowballed into us doing a lot more work for a lot of different news organizations. But I think the best part about it, honestly, was that it gave us confidence. Sort of, it kind of served as like, hey, like, the work you do is like interesting and valuable, and people like it, as evidenced by the fact that you got this third place award. And I think that was probably really the best part about sort of throwing ourselves out there, in addition to the fact, of course, that they, that we won some money. So I'm totally over time, but I want to answer these questions, so I'm going to keep going. And I totally understand if the rest of you guys have other things to do. Okay. So Sarah wants to know, tell me more about those unicorns that can design and code. Are those normally very distinct freelancers that only do one or the other? If so, can you do both? That's great, right? Okay. So basically, I've been talking about these unicorns, which are designers who can also code. Yes. I mean, basically, the problem you have right now in the tech industry that I see a lot, and I think this is a really big opportunity, especially for people who are creative and come out of like the arts, because I feel like there's so many people who I know personally, at least, who are artists who are looking for interesting work. But basically, the problem you have is that you have designers who work in Photoshop, and then you have developers who work in code. And the issue is that Photoshop is not really a true analog for what the web is all about, because it is static. And so what happens is that you've got these designers who are super, super talented and make absolutely beautiful designs, but they aren't, they just aren't able to be fully aware of the sort of the capabilities of code, the interactivity. They don't have a total grasp of the medium, so they make beautiful things, but they don't always make the most usable things, is what I'm trying to say. And I have yet to see that, getting good at wireframing or anything like that will teach you as much about interaction and the sort of creation of websites as actually creating websites. So basically, the point being that if you are good at visual design and can code and understand, even if you're not that maybe you are a good front-end coder, but you're not a fantastic back-end coder, but you just understand how programming works, you understand how data works, you understand how scaling works, you understand how interactions work and all the different states that take place. It's like every designer who even understands that a little bit is like, it's like, hallelujah. And we're really, really lucky because we have a fantastic designer on the Skillcrush team who does really get that stuff. But yes, I mean, I can't impress upon you how valuable people who can sort of play that role are. So if you can become that, that's really, really excellent. So Jessica asked the question here okay, you've landed the clients, finished projects, everyone's happy, tips for how to solicit testimonials or referrals. So my answer to that is like really, really obvious. And maybe therefore unhelpful, but it is basically that you really just need to ask for it. I mean, we do this all the time at Skillcrush. We ask for testimonials. I would say for referrals, it's a little bit different. So testimonials is one thing. So there you can really just ask for it. You can just say, can you answer these 3 questions maybe, and then you can take that and edit it and make it something that's a little more coherent and then send it back to your client. And in my experience, like if you did good work and people enjoyed working with you, like they're going to be so happy to help you. Referral is a little bit trickier. I think the way that you have to do it with referrals is you can obviously say, hey, like just so you know, I'm looking for work and I really love, I loved working with you. I love the work that we did. I would love to do other types of work like that. I read a really good article on the Muse recently that was about sort of how to look for referrals without seeming desperate. I think the thing that you want to look out for is like you don't want to be desperate and you don't want to make it seem like you're asking, like you don't want to sort of put the burden on your client, right? So you want it to be something where they get to be in a position of like, hey, I have this awesome person that I can share with you versus like, I'm doing my ex-consultant a favor by referring them. I think one thing that you can think about is that you can always ask for introductions from your client. So you can say, hey, like, I'm interested in, let's say, for me, like I was working at WNYC, which is a radio station in New York, and I could have said to my client, hey, like, I'm really a huge fan of the work that the New York Times Interactive team is doing. I know that speaking to my client at the time, was co-teaching a class at the New School with the guy who ran the interactive news department at the time. So I could say something like, hey, like, I know that you do teach this class with this dude. Would you be willing to introduce me? Because I would love to sort of just hear what he's up to, see if there's any way I can trick your house. So that's the way. So, I think you kind of have to, you have to find a really sort of suave way to ask for the referral. Okay. Okay, so Angela asked a really good question, which is, what if you're past phase 1 and you're looking for bigger paying clients and you're a small startup? How do you find those bigger clients? I'm trying to think about the answer to that question. I think, so I'm going to be perfectly honest with you, and in my first job, we really had a lot of inbound. I mean, I guess for us, it was a lot about sort of sussing out the different clients that were coming to us and figuring out which projects we were interested in and developing those. So I think that this is where you really have to start getting an outbound sales strategy. And you really have to start thinking about things like, emailing people, figuring out how to network with them. The number one thing in all situations, like I said before, is like you really need to be able to identify the decision makers and figure out sort of who's the person who's in the position to hire you and what are they looking to hire for. And that just takes a lot of research, honestly, and networking. And I think that to a certain extent, you kind of have to like be okay with the fact that it's going to happen somewhat slowly. Like, you really do need to do this incrementally. It's not something where you're going to go from like a $5,000 client to a $50,000 client overnight. You're really going to have to slowly build up a portfolio of work, get some domain expertise in whatever area, and build out your list. Okay. It's a great question, Anna Laura Diaz, and you're reminding me that I should talk more about the blueprints. So how often do the blueprint courses start, and how long do they run? That is, if we can't sign up this month, when can we sign up again? So the answer is that we are running them every month, and they last for 3 months. Yeah, and you obviously can only sign up, on a monthly basis, but we would love to have you. We are really excited to start with our next cohort on Monday. They're so much fun. I can't even tell you, the blueprints are so much fun. It's such a great group of people. It's such a delight. Everyone gets really excited. It's really about just meeting some awesome people who are in a similar position with you, brainstorming with them, working with them, learning some really cool skills, and then putting those to work to build brilliant, amazing projects. So I encourage you all, if you have not signed up already, to come and join us for a blueprint. And then once you're done with the blueprint, you can start charging for your work. Okay, so I'm going to take one last question. I'm going to take it from Facebook, and then I think I have to call it a day. But as always, you guys, we're always here to answer any and all of your questions. So please, if you have any questions, you can email me directly at adda@skillcrush.com. Or you can email us at hello@skillcrush.com, and then I or my wonderful, our wonderful, leader of customer happiness, Kelly, will be sure to answer you. We love user questions. If you have any questions about the blueprints, please reach out. If you are currently not working, please reach out to us. We have a special program for people who are currently looking for work, because we really want to do everything we can to support you in that process. So whether it is teaching you skills or talking to you about how to bill for your work or how to manage your clients, we just want to be there for you. So please reach out. And yeah, so without further ado, I'm going to answer this one last question, and then we're going to call it a day. Okay. Sarah is asking, oh, she says I already answered it. Okay. Okay, so Jessica Davis asked a really great question, which is, when moving into the consulting phase, is it a good idea to bring on partners in the beginning, or should that wait? Okay, so I mean, okay, so the long answer, or the short answer, I don't know, one of the answers, is that you're going to end up working with partners, whether or not they're literally business partners or people that that you pay but that you always work with. I mean, it's especially as your projects get bigger, it's possible to do things alone, right? Like I have tried to be the lady who does everything on her own, and it just is a bad idea. Now, that said, the choice to go into business with someone is a very, very serious undertaking. And my one piece of advice I would give you for that is that if you decide to do that, it's really important that you hire a lawyer and you get what is effectively sort of like a business prenup. And that is basically you create an agreement of an understanding of what will happen if you decide to part ways, because it's very common to part ways with your business partners, because it's sort of the way I describe it, being in a business partnership is like being married without any of sort of the benefits of marriage and just all the hard parts, because you know, unlike your husband or wife, you don't go and like kiss and cuddle and have a romantic evening with your business partner. Yeah, but I think it's really important in the freelancer stage to build up your network of people that you can work with. And that's one of the core things about the freelancer stage. You really want to get some experience with working with other people, and that serves both to help you learn how to work with other people, but also helps you meet other people who are good in your industry who you could potentially work with. And, you know, one of our goals at Skill Crash is to really build up a lot of community. So I think it's also something, you know, that you should start exploring that from the get-go, right? Like, I think that the strongest projects have more than one voice, because there's always so much to learn. I mean, I really, for me, like when I started working with my business partner, Kate, who I ran my client services company with, I mean, it was like magic. I mean, it was like, wow, like all of a sudden, like, you know, she was this amazing designer and I kind of was good at product and front-end development, and it was really, we both had this shared experience of like when we started working together, it wasn't like additive, it was really just like exponential, right? Like the power and sort of the awesomeness that we were able to create together really was exponentially better. So yeah, so I think you should absolutely start working with people, you know, today. Find one of these people, you know what I mean? Like reach out to Sharon or Shannon or Kathleen or something like that, and start working on projects together. Okay. On that note, I encourage you again, like I said, our blueprints start on Monday. We would so love to have you. It is such a fabulous group of people. I promise that you will make lots of friends and learn a ton of really, really useful stuff. And otherwise, I just wish you well. I hope everyone has a wonderful weekend, and you know, good luck making money with your skills. All right, have a good one. Take care.